Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, broadcasting live from Phoenix Business Radio X in Phoenix, Arizona, where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber, and this is the 21st episode, and I'm here today with Renée Smith, the CEO and founder of A Human Workplace. Renee, how are you today?
I am terrific. Thank you, Hylke. It's so good to be with you.
Same here. I feel quite moved to be with you, Renee. I'm going to say a bit more about you in a second. But one of the things I really enjoy and am moved by with you is that I see you as a person who's put their heart and their feet in the same place. And I'll handle that in a moment. And I have great admiration for that. Before we go and talk a bit more about Renee and hear from Renee, I want to say a bit more about this podcast series, just to contextualize and get us all together in a similar intention. So we're Rooted and Unwavering to help us connect more deeply to what is true and to be aware that as human beings, we get pulled into different directions all the time, and that we have a choice in that, and that there's such beauty and such strength that comes online as leaders, as teams, as organizations, when we get closer and closer and closer to what is true and be rooted from that place, which is for everyone maybe slightly different, maybe also somewhat similar. So that's what this work is about. This week, I sang in a chorus performance, and there's this one little line that says, "We will rise, we will rise." And that little sentence has been in my head all week, and I was thinking about that in preparation for this podcast. Like, we will be rooted, we are rooted, and I know that each of us goes through challenges this week. I went through my own challenges this week. Everybody has their challenges. And then how do we stay rooted in those moments? So that's a little bit about this podcast. And now about Renee. Renee comes to us as the founder and CEO of A Human Workplace. And before that, she was a part of the governor's office in Washington State, where she helped to direct workplace transformation for the state of Washington, with a focus on creating a more loving, respectful, inclusive, and compassionate experience for state government teams. It's such a beautiful, beautiful charter. She also led the award-winning culture change work as Director of Organization Development for the Department of Enterprise Services. Now, she didn't just start this organization. She's done a lot of primary research on analyzing stories of hundreds of people and learn from their experience of love and fear in the workplace. And I love the audacity of calling that out in the workplace. Renee has spoken to hundreds of audiences in 10 countries, is a prolific blogger, published in several journals, has been appearing on numerous podcasts, including this one now. She also has a Master of Science of Organization Development from Pepperdine University and a Lean Six Sigma Belt from the University of Washington. She's a researcher, she's a writer, teacher, advises people all over, and also in the Pacific Northwest where she lives. And when you're not traveling, Renee, you enjoy sculling, which you have to explain to me what that means in the Puget Sound. You like drawing oil pastels. Maybe some of the things behind you, if people are looking at you, might be yours. I'm not sure. Concocting craft cocktails for friends, hosting grandma summer camp, and reindeer games in the winter for her grandchildren. I'm just at your feet, Renee. So what a background. So tell me about your journey of connectedness. Tell me about your journey of connectedness. what would you like to highlight first?
Gosh. So I think, I am an introverted people person. And I think that there are a lot of introverts who are people. That is certainly me. I relish my quiet time. That sculling is rowing in single shells. I love to do that on the Puget Sound, and have my own shell that I love to row in and spend time on the water. And there's a lot that I gather from being alone and in solitude, and walking and being in nature and so on. And I just cherish and thrive so much through being connected in meaningful relationships with family and friends and colleagues, and really also with just people that I meet randomly. Those random encounters with strangers, or in the passing of daily life, that I think we missed so much during the pandemic. I relish all of that. So connectedness and being authentic and open and connected to people is part of who I am as a person. And I would say that connectedness has come to have really profound meaning in my life as I have done this research on fear and on love in the workplace, and interviewed people, 75 primary interviews, kind of formal one-on-one research-based interviews, and then workshopped with hundreds and hundreds of people, and have heard and collected, those stories, and have seen and understood from the impacts both of fear and disconnection and indifference, and in contrast, love and safety and connection, how powerful and important it is that we're in the latter circumstance, just how much we need that as people. And it's become really the focus of my life work to point people away from fear and disconnection and toward love and connection.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm imagining you being in the skull. Now I know what that means.
Yeah.
And on the Puget Sound.
Yes.
In this space by yourself, and connecting more deeply.
Me and the sea lions, the sea lions would always follow. So
wow.
Not totally alone, but yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes. So can you say a bit more about your own interview with yourself about fear and love? I don't know about you, but I have my own daily encounters with both friends. So
Yes.
Can you say a bit more about your own conversation, your inner conversation with those two orientations?
Yeah, that whether it's walking, just walking, and being sort of in silence with my thoughts, or I really love the rhythm of rowing, and there's a, so to kind of get in the physical space that will take me into the question, that when you're rowing, there's a sliding seat, and there's a rhythm of the oars, and a movement to it that is very distinct and very zen, I would say. I think of it as elegance and grace and power kind of all at the same time. And it helps me to connect and be present in that rhythm to really what's going on, and to be able to hear and notice the voices of fear that are chattering away, and that are giving me the litany of things that I need to worry about, or that voice thinks I need to worry about. And some of those are real concerns. This journey is not without like a lot of oh my gosh moments. And also, though, in that rhythm of being on the water, and that movement, and the silence, is the chance to remember, and to sort of have those two parts converse. And so listening to the voice of love, and of confidence and peace, and assurance that can come, just reminding myself of what is also true, of what I feel like is my joyful assignment, and letting those two kind of come into conversation, and into a sort of harmony. The issues that might come up, that might create fear, that might feel threatening, those don't necessarily just go away because I think about them, and I'm out there rowing. I mean, the things are still the things. The challenges are still there, but the clarity and peace that can come from that recentering and remembering is really keeps me going, and it's so important.
I'm just imagining you sitting with the rhythm, as you mentioned, Zen,
Yeah.
and getting into that rhythm and having those thoughts pop up. And I love that you talked about the litany of worries and things, which I think is so recognizable for many of us. And then you talked about finding that place of love. And interestingly, you mentioned confidence.
Hmm.
Can you say more about the relationship between love and confidence from your own experience and maybe also from what you've been hearing? Because that to me
Hmm.
is such a powerful connection.
Yeah. So, so when I, for me, the clarity that I've found myself in over, I think, since 2015, really, and even more so in 2017. So I sort of had this epiphany about love and fear in 2015, and then explored and finally did the research and got super clear and convicted. And some of that came from looking people in the eye again and again and hearing their stories and realizing both the stories of harm from fear and toxic fear and the stories of benefit and joy and expansion, and confidence and flow and goodness coming when people are in conditions of love and safety, and just like being so clear about that, and setting out on a path just to like to continue to say yes to these opportunities that would open up. It was like I would say yes to a thing, and then and step into that, and then a next opportunity, a next connection, a next open door. And with each yes, things just continue to expand. And so in that has been a sense of real confidence that this is like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. There is like the next provision each and every time. And I'm not really a religious person, but more of a spiritual person, and having a sense of just connectedness to what the universe wants me to do, what I am here to do, what's my part to contribute. And so in that, that sense of being in the flow of love has given me a lot of confidence that even when things are, uncertain and maybe, at times, heartbreaking or, challenging, like all of the different varieties of challenge that can come, and they have, that there is still this like deep confidence that it's all going to be fine, and I, can continue to step forward. And I see similarly when there's something neurophysiologically that happens to us, and I've definitely heard this, and have studied this in the research that I do, that that as people are in conditions of love and safety and have a sense of care and acceptance and belonging, that they can relax, their shoulders drop, and they can kind of get comfortable in their seat and not be on guard, and can engage the frontal lobe of their brain, and and then their whole self, not just their thinking but their feeling, their physiology, and can tap into their whole wisdom as whole people, and have confidence to bring that forward into whatever the opportunity is that they have. And it is a beautiful thing for individuals and for groups of people too, for teams or whole organizations or systems, when we are in that condition. Incredibly powerful, incredibly productive, incredibly beautiful.
Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I am very curious about the epiphany in, I think you said 2017 or so, of like
15, yeah,
15 of love and fear.
sure.
So this discernment that presented itself and then in some way became related to what I heard you say was your joyful assignment.
Yes.
And so say a bit more about that, because I think that's such a beautiful thing for us to hear about, also as we all reflect on our own lives and the epiphanies that we all have ourselves, and how we listen or maybe sometimes don't listen to those.
Sure. So in 2000, well, in the sort of mid 2000s, I was working at the Department of Enterprise Services. I was directing organization development and continuous improvement for that state agency, and guiding culture change in our agency and partnering across state government for that. And it was I was having a conversation with the director of our agency, Chris Liu, and talking to him about the leadership required in that, in that work that we were doing. And I asked him, Chris, what do you think is the most important job of a leader? And it's one of those moments I'll never forget. Like, it's just riveted in my mind. He immediately replied, to eliminate fear from the workplace. And that was just music to my ears. That was a beautiful answer. I love that as someone trained in organization development and aligned with my values. It just was terrific to hear him frame it that way. It was so crystallizing. And it made sense that it was something that I had seen him work to do in his own way, and that he had encouraged us as his executive team to do. And as I started to think about that, though, it was kind of clear that it was only part of the story. It was only like half of the equation, that if we have, if we're dialing fear down, if we're trying to shrink fear, something else is growing, something else is taking fear's place. And I really had to think about what that was, and interrogated that for myself, and talked to people, and essentially I came to the conclusion that when we shrink fear, the thing that takes fear's place is love, that the opposite of fear is love, that the two primary human experiences that we have in life are either fearful or loving. All of the negative can be traced back essentially to fear, all of the positive essentially to love. And with that clarity for myself, and kind of leaning into exploring that a little bit more, and I got pretty sure about that for myself, if you will. Yes. And then I said that out loud in a really public place. I was in a huge conference, a state government conference, and we were in a breakout session with about 400 people in the room. That's how big the conference was. A breakout session had 400 people.
Wow. One breakout session.
Yeah, one breakout session. Yeah, it was a conference of about 2,500 people. And so we were leading a breakout session of about 400. And Chris was talking about that it's a leader's job to eliminate fear. And I just sort of took the moment to say, as he finished, to say, and when we eliminate fear, the thing that takes fear's place is love. And, you can imagine, and I think listeners will probably imagine what happened in that moment, which is silence, uncomfortable silence. Like, did she really just say the L word? And there was just like this tension in the room, and I made a joke. I named it, like, got kind of quiet. But then, went on to explain that we love our work, and we love the people we serve, and we want to be loved. We love we love what we do and who we do it with. There is love there. And when we know that we belong, and that we matter, and that we can contribute, when we essentially have an experience of feeling loved, we can do and be and give our very best. And Hylke, there was spontaneous applause in the room that day. And for weeks later, people were stopping me across state government and saying, I was there when you said that. Keep saying that. And I not only discovered that, I had this clarity for myself about this truth, but I discovered that I had touched something that other people weren't repelled by, or weren't shocked and didn't shut down, but actually said, we need more of that. And that was really catalyzing. That let me know that I needed to lean in to understand this better, and not only to read other research that's out there and other writing and so on, and listen to what others were saying, but that I could, as a social scientist, I could do my own research. And so created a research project, as you alluded to, and began to interview people, collecting stories of, and I would ask people, tell me a story about a time when you felt afraid at work. What happened? What did you do? What did others do? What were the impacts, and so on? And what did that experience mean to you? And then tell me a story about a time when you felt loved at work. What did you do? What did others do? What happened? What were the impacts? And impacts on you, and on your work, and on your team, and on your customer, and on your personal life, and on your physical well-being, on both fearful and loving circumstances. And then what did that mean to you? And those stories, like I say, were really compelling, and have been the foundation of everything that we do now.
Beautiful, beautiful. So say a bit more about then, how do you practice in your own life, and then maybe also how you help others to reduce fear and to cultivate, that's my word, but maybe not your word, to allow for love. I love that it came from that letting go of fear, and then there was love.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear how you work with that yourself,
Hmm.
and also how you help others with that, because I can imagine that each of us, like your interviewees, have associations with fear and with love. And then in the moment when life happens,
Yeah.
that's a different story often.
Right.
So how tell us a bit about that experience you have yourself with
Yeah.
those transitions and how you work with that.
So, the way that I think about what we're here to do, essentially on this planet, is that we're here to learn to love again, or to rediscover how to love, or maybe, I mean, it depends on how you think about it. I think that it's always been in us, and it gets buried over, and we have to kind of just uncover it. And that is not just in our personal lives. That is meant to be in every facet of our life. And so that is really our primary work as humans. And oh, by the way, we do a whole lot of other things, but in the course of doing all those other things is the opportunity to learn to love. For me personally, there's nothing like, putting putting it all in. Like, I have thrown it all in, everything, all my worldly goods, all of my future, my career. It is all about this now. And there's nothing like that to like make one clear every day, about sort of to be self-reflective and aware. And so, on our team, we Rick Gage is part of our team, as you know, and listeners may be familiar with Rick, and he has so beautifully put it this way, that first we have to be it before we can share it or do it. And so we're quite focused on how do we practice love in our team, in our own interactions, in those moments that are really tough, when we blow it, when we let someone down, when we say something that unintentionally harms someone and our impact is off. So for me, love comes in, needing to face and like to be self-aware and face those times when I'm, both when I'm proud and doing well and feel, in the flow and feeling it, and when I realize I've, done harm or misstepped and I need to repair. And so there's like a being with the, it's not really the weight of it. It's just the, I don't know quite what word to put to it, but being with the truth of it continually,
Mm.
and owning that, like having to just be with whatever that means. And sometimes, like I say, sometimes it's wonderful and flowy and feels great, and is all the sort of warm good things that people might feel. And sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes we have to share hard things with people or receive hard things ourselves, and learning continually to do that with love at the center is what I think what my work is all about, and I think what we're essentially all here to do as people. The As we work with organizations, there's lots of different entry points. So, organizations come, hear about this, and everyone has their own lens that they're bringing to that, their own maybe longing or need. And so we meet people where they're at and understand what that entry point is, and then help to, everyone we work with always knows that this is what's at the foundation, and that the way that we work with them is going to be with love at the center. And we want to help them move to put love at the center. And some people are ready to just like embrace that, and others want to know that that's there and need to slowly move into that. So always with gentleness and with mindfulness of where people are at in their journey.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So I am going to take the seat of the skeptic for a second, because I know that those voices exist in us, right?
Sure.
And we sometimes meet them, maybe also when we work with people or work with colleagues. And I can imagine a voice that says, "Yeah, love, but what's that? What is that? Because isn't love that sort of gooey emotion, and when I just realized that I failed, quote unquote, or I did something that wasn't on, I hurt somebody, or I just messed something up." What's the place of love in those situations? And what does that even mean? Does
Mhm.
that mean just glossing over and it's like all good and we don't have to?
Mhm.
So what does
Far
that
from
mean?
yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah, far from it. So, Moshe Engelberg wrote a book called The Amare Wave, which is also about love. And I love his definition of love. He defines love as the energy that uplifts and connects.
Uh,
And so, in those moments when that you've just described, and all that whole variety of human experience, is the need to uplift and connect.
hmm.
And sometimes, that uplifting is from a place of, someone, you know, uh, being downcast or demoralized, and they need that kind of uplift. Sometimes the uplift is from someone who has wandered off or is not contributing their part, for example, and
Yes,
needs to be brought back and uplifted to a higher standard for themselves.
yes, yes.
Sometimes that uplift is the need for more courage. Sometimes that uplift is a challenge. So
Uh,
that the uplift that can take many different forms, but it's the connection, that connected care for each other that allows us to be and bring that uplift, all the varieties of the uplift that we need for
uh,
each other in those moments. Um,
wow.
I, yeah, I'll pause there. So
I love that definition that
thank
love is about uplifting,
you.
uplifting, uh, and really that connected care for each other.
Mhm.
That's really powerful.
I might add, if I could, that the other thing that I think about is, so when I ask people to tell me a story about a time when they felt loved at work, some people would answer and use the word love and tell a story, and other people would say, I never thought about this as love before, but now that you mentioned it, and they would tell me a story, and those would take the variety of examples of respect, of trust, of kindness or compassion, of appreciation and gratitude, of equity and justice sometimes, or of courage, that kind of thing, of challenge, as I said. So there was this whole, variety of ways that people had experiences, and when I would name love, they would say, oh, it was this, or it was this, or it was this. And basically they provided the operating definition of love at work. And so it takes a lot of different forms. I, I think that one of the important things, especially in terms of leadership, that I've come to appreciate is just that, we can't, that the higher up you go in an organization, the greater your capacity for love has to be. So it can't be just loving the one person, and sort of that idea of, oh, this person, I'll just let this happen. That permissiveness or lenience is not love. It's likely not love for that individual, but it's also not love for the whole.
Mm,
And we really have to, as we are, in leadership, have to love the whole, the breadth and width and depth of love
mm,
for our whole organization and the entire system, really, that we're responsible for. And so that means, hard questions, hard conversations sometimes,
yes.
but done with compassion, done with dignity and respect. Those are all, ways that we lead with love.
Mm. I want to explore a bit more about the crucible that we find ourselves in,
Mhm.
and we're almost going to go into a break. But before we go into this break, maybe talk a bit more about how do people access within themselves that sense of uplifting and
Hmm.
not fall back into the fearful state.
Yeah. I think it's a journey. There's so much in our world that conditions us toward fear, toward leading with fear, and toward trying to motivate with fear. There's a lot of unlearning we have to do about that.
Mm,
And healing, frankly.
mm,
And so I think it takes time, and it's a journey. And it has to just begin with that grace and compassion continually to ourselves.
ah, beautiful. Let's take a short break, and then afterwards I'd love to explore more about how we unlearn what
Mm.
we seem to have learned as a society about fear, and maybe go into that a little bit more so that we can
Mhm.
be with that and then also talk more about the power of grace and compassion, which you, to me, also exude, Renee. So I can see
Thank
how
you.
that's so important. We've been in this podcast, Rooted and Unwavering, talking with Renée Smith. She's the founder and CEO of A Human Workplace, and she has taken a stance, given her whole life to this joyful assignment of helping to uplift through moving from fear to love, not only for herself, but also for the organization she leads and for the organization's teams and leaders that she guides from fear to love. We'll take a break now, and we'll see you back after.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. We've had a conversation with Renée Smith. He's the founder and CEO of A Human Workplace. And the thing that I already will take away is this one little pesky phrase, Renee, that this sense of clarity, and that you went for it. And it didn't seem to me like a Las Vegas kind of bet, but something that came from a much deeper place. So thank you for sharing that. That's very inspiring. So say to us a bit more about how we as humans have become acculturated to fear.
Hmm. So, yeah, if we think about all of the different places where we learn and are influenced in life, from our earliest, days, and whether it's in our family, from parents, from teachers, from coaches, um, from within society, and different places in society, authorities in society, there's a kind of a fear-based structure or a fear-based approach that is sort of rooted in in those interactions, and it's not that but there's some complexity to this. So I don't want to say that those are all wrong, or that it's I think that there's a lot to take apart there, and I don't claim to be an expert in early childhood raise 4 kids, but for grown adults now, 4 offspring would be a way to put it, and 9 grandchildren.
Wow.
But it's complicated, right? So I don't want to. How do I put this? I guess what I just want to acknowledge is that in our early examples, fear is often there, and the early examples that we have of leaders in our lives often are guided by or motivate us with fear.
Right.
And we rarely, or the examples that we might take into adulthood, into the workplace, or into, for those who end up being supervisors or managers or leaders, we have fewer examples to draw from that are love-based. And I think we just have to acknowledge that I think there's a bigger conversation about why that's so, and what that should be, and whether that should shift or not. Like, all of that is a different thing. But if we just acknowledge that then there is some relearning that needs to happen, or some expanding of our model of how we interact with each other. I think it's also true that, like, in the last 10 years or so, it's become more commonly appreciated, and certainly during COVID and the pandemic, how we function as people in terms of fear and threat responses, in terms of stress, in terms of trauma. So we know so much more in recent years, and it's more commonly known, throughout society, how we respond when we are threatened, when we have stress, when we experience a traumatic incident, and how we shut down, how we pull back, how we withdraw, how we don't function as our best selves. And so I think part of what we need to come to grips with is just what's true about how human beings function and are motivated, and can bring themselves at their best to any circumstance. So that's cognitive, right? That is coming to know and appreciate, that doesn't necessarily change our behavior, especially in the moment. And I think it is it's a continual process of like relearning, of committing to, of having, mentors and coaches and like mutual commitment together to, a different way of being, and being able to hold the mirror up to each other. I certainly have that in my own organization. And I'm grateful for that. People who can tell you the truth, who love you, who care, who have your best interests and the best interests of everyone else at heart, and that context, that communal support toward a different way of being creates an environment where we can live into being different, and not only just sort of learning and thinking differently, but actually then being different together, being more loving together.
Yeah. I love the compassion in what you're describing. Like, we don't even need to understand, or maybe we don't understand fully why things are this way. But let's know they are this way. That we do not have many examples as supervisors, managers, or leaders of leading with love, and that we have more examples of leading from a place of contraction, fear, and all that. And so just you saying that already, as I listen to you, Renee, I'm already like, I was like, okay, all right, of course. And then that, as you're saying, already starts to elicit this sense of grace, compassion, expansion, and more possibilities. So I love that you are bringing that to the fore in the way, and the humility that you bring to that. Now, I'm just curious, because we talked about Skull, we talked about four children and nine
Yeah, those are the yours, mine, and ours grandchildren, and we love them all.
Oh, beautiful. It's beautiful. So tell me a little bit about your own life journey as you've been traveling through all these different stages, right? And I don't want to call you an elder, but maybe I will call you an elder simply because of what you just said to me, like person in Skull with 9 grandchildren. Okay, could be seen as an elder, like from that perspective. Can you share with us a little bit about the stages? Because I know our listeners are all stages of life, and it's not about the metric, you should be here, I should be there, but tell us a little bit more about your journey, because my sense is that this insight and your ability to speak in that moment in that 400-person breakout group didn't just happen. It was grounded in work and life. So tell us about this.
Yeah. I was, as a young woman, as a high school student, straight A student and student body president and a whole bunch of other things, off to college, confident, happy, and kind of lost my way after a year of college, or actually it was after a couple of years. Quit college, got married, and went off and followed my husband in his dreams to Alaska, and sort of gave up my dreams, started having a family, had a couple children, and I was a homeschooling, bread baking mom, and kind of probably a type A mom. Did all the things, like whatever I'm doing it wholeheartedly, I sort of left a part of myself behind and my dreams behind, and followed his dreams, but it was a good life. Like, that was my choice, and I loved my kids and loved my family, and we had a good community, and that was that's what I was doing. I lived in the Aleutian Islands in Dutch Harbor, Alaska for 4 years, and then lived in Homer, Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula for 4 years. And after the first year of living in Homer, my husband was flying his private plane, and was in a plane crash, crashed his plane in the hills kind of behind our home, and sustained a traumatic brain injury, and was never the same. And he lived. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, in the hospital for a couple months, and then eventually I got to bring him home with he and our 2 kids. And at that point, I felt like this was this is my, this is what I've said yes to. This is part of For Better or For Worse, and this is my husband and my family, and I need to, live into this with the most love that I can and make the very best of this circumstance. And so we did, and continued on in that relationship for 8 years, and had 2 more children, and just tried to make life work. But eventually it became damaging. It became harmful, and just wasn't sustainable anymore. And I felt released finally to step away. And at that point of stepping away, I hadn't completed college, and I just didn't know what I was going to do. But I'm so grateful that my parents said, we were going to help pay for college originally. We'll help you finish these 2 years. So I was so fortunate and privileged to have that support to finish those last 2 years of college, and so earned my undergrad. So I was a single working mom with 4 kids at home, and completing college through those years. And there's this saying that we have, and that I kind of adopted. There's this idea we can do hard things, and I had this saying that I can do anything for 2 years. And so there was 2 years to finish college, and then I decided I was going to go to grad school. And it was, 2 years to go through grad school. And then it took another 2 years to kind of find my way in to the work that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So that's been a little bit of my path of kind of, and I've loved taking different forms. So there was what love looked like, in that crisis moment during the plane crash and the aftermath of that. Yes. And putting love at the center for my family and my husband. Yes. And then there was putting love at the center in the decision to leave the marriage and move forward and kind of reclaim my life and my voice and my place in the world. And that was really about putting love at the center for my children, for sure, but of my own life. Yes. And valuing my own life and loving myself. And so, all of that then, kind of learning to be in the world in this new way, and overcoming this sense of regret that had I missed out, had I missed it, had I would, when I went to grad school, I was surrounded by, it was an executive style program. We, we're in residence once a quarter for 2 years. And I was surrounded by all of these accomplished people who'd been in industry and in government. And I had not. And so I had to kind of come to terms with that, and eventually come to see that all the experiences that I've just described gave me a deeper, not a deeper, but a deep conviction and an ability to speak when the moment came in ways that I probably wouldn't have, or maybe wouldn't have been able to, had I not been through those experiences. So it's all preparation, right? And so now, my work is all about helping people put love at the center of their work. Yes. And so I feel like all of that prepared me for this, for this experience and for what I'm doing now.
Yes, yes. Such clarity with which you speak and with which you share that experience. I want to sort of roll back the tape a little bit, because it's like we're now sort of, my sense talking with you right now is standing a little bit like standing not on top of the mountain maybe, but up on the mountain and looking back into the valley and all the ups and downs. And it's like sort of there's a sense of oh yeah, right, that makes sense. That was putting love at the center. Yeah,
right. Didn't see it necessarily at the time, right?
right. So tell us a little bit about how this orientation that is so deeply rooted in you of having love in the center, it's like crystal clear. It's like clearly Renee is being love at the center. It's very obvious, right? It's very obvious. So how did that get cultivated? What were some of the moments of, now that this is my language, awareness? You may have a completely different language, but what happened along the way that you're able to make these choices? Because I heard you say, for example, with the plane crash, that this is what I chose.
Yeah.
So say a bit more about how on earth, as a human being, do you do this?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I don't know. I'll reflect a little. I mean, there's just snapshots that I remember. So a couple of things occur to me, and one is that I am a pretty positive person, and have I have positive energy, and I had a strong foundation in my early years to draw from, and I think that is not a small thing. For me, it means that I've lived through these experiences with some sense of sort of groundedness and confidence, and healthy, attachments to draw from, healthy relationships. And that's been significant. I'm grateful for that. I think it's kind of a strange thing. I think there's also a good, healthy amnesia of like my ability, and I think I'll call it an ability to sometimes just forget and like let go and keep going. That serves me well. It's funny. Yeah, I've got 4 children, and they will sometimes remember, recollect, oh, remember when this happened, Mom, or that happened, and they're kind of remembering when they might have been going off the rails a little bit, or there were those challenges in growing up, or silly things that happened, where they got in trouble or something. And oftentimes I don't remember what they're talking about, because maybe vaguely, but like there's a certain sense of like, okay, I just need to let that go and keep looking forward because I can't do anything about that. And I don't know if that's healthy or not, but for me, it's been effective to just sort of be able to remembering certain things, but also just letting go and not like dwelling in the struggle or the pain or the frustration, but just continue with positivity, looking forward, and assuming that the next right thing is going to happen. Yes. I think connected to my work about love, it's also true that I've had this sense and have seen again and again where like the next, I said this a little earlier, a little differently, that the next door opens or the next person shows up or the next provision is made. So, this is especially, I left the governor's office just before the pandemic hit. I actually had this sense that I was supposed to leave and go into private work and take this message out into the world, not just for the state of Washington. And I gave notice in December of 2019. And I had this, I was director of workplace transformation for the state, left my job, said March 2nd, 2020 is going to be my last day of work. And by March 6th, it was clear I was not going to New Zealand or to Europe or to any of the places that were planned. And I was staying in my living room. And by March 16th, we were live with a program called Working Alone Together. And we're supporting the community, a global community, with gatherings, virtual gatherings to help process the pandemic. And so that was like, that sense of where the next right thing is going to happen, that I couldn't plan for that. I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. And it was, setting in motion to sell my house, and sold property, because now my income is gone, and the income I thought I was going to have was gone, but sold a piece of property that I, had bought a couple of years previously that I lived on for the next year and a half, and sold that in March of 2020. And so just like the next provision. And then I would also share, because like as leaders, it's not easy. I then ended up like gathering a team of people. We have 30 affiliates in the US and the UK now. And that team was gathering and growing. And we were like a team without a business model, because the business model I thought I was going to do was gone. It was shelved, at least, and I had to kind of figure out what next. But we had this team, and so I'm cultivating and nurturing this team and pouring resources into maintaining this organization and growing and learning and building our business, and got to the point where I expended all my funds. It was in December, December of 21, that I had a little sticky on my computer that said, tap into get your 401k, like drain the 401k was the sticky. And that day, someone called and said, Renee, I believe in this work. We need to bring this into our organization. I want to do it in the first half of next year. Here's $25,000 toward that work. And that was the bridge. And into 2022, everything took off.
Yes.
But it was like, holding the space, holding on, because I'm, watching it all drain and, paying the bills and like holding on and closer to the edge. Right. But yet believing, like trusting that I'm supposed to be doing this. This is it. I've thrown it all in, and the provision has been there.
Such courage.
Or kind of crazy boldness, maybe, I don't know. But here we are, and I am so grateful and so thankful that I get to do this. That one of the things that's true is that when you say my work is about love, people send you stuff about love. Love just pours in, and that's a beautiful side channel to all of this, is that I just the love pours in all kinds of different forms.
Yes. Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about, and this hour is almost over, which is hard to believe, because I can realize that I realize I can talk to you for hours.
I hope we'll talk
about. Tell us about 2020 and 2021. So, because you talked about making, like, the provisions will be made or will come, like you the next right thing, and you also felt this sense of, at least you talked about, and sense is felt of, like, this is mine to do. Okay, this is mine to do.
Yeah.
How do you stay in your seat, in the seat of that purpose over those 2 years when the bridge was not there yet financially?
Yeah. So part of it was just that I've made the commitment, and I, like, at this point, I cannot imagine doing anything else, even in those days when I wasn't quite clear, how it was going to, like, what form it would take. It was trying to find the form, and frankly too, just trying to find my way into through some basic business things. Coming from government, I didn't have a lot of experience with marketing and sales. Like, that's just not something. We'd done a different kind of thing in the work that I'd done. So there was some learning to do, and so what occurs to me is part of this journey during that time was sort of focusing in on one thing and kind of forgetting everything else. It was as if I had I'd moved house and moved all my boxes into this new place, if you will, metaphorically, and put all of the stuff of my life and my career away in closets and under the bed and in the attic and in the garage, and like hidden all these things away, and only like kept out one box, and we were just doing the one thing. And I kind of forgot about everything else. And I think, that those early days of the pandemic were a really strange time. And, to just sort of for me, it was very focused and a little surreal. And so I actually, at the end of August, physically moved I sold my house and moved to a little place down by the water that I rented for a while. And in that move, the physical move, came some unearthing and remembering. And I started thinking, wait a second, like, I used to do some other things, right? I used to have some other things that were important to me, and that some other things that were like part of this. What were those things? Oh yeah. And I started remembering. In a sense, it was remembering who I was and remembering what this work was about. And I kind of metaphorically assembled all that stuff on a big table, and then had to look at it for a while, and had to figure out, how does this fit together now? And in conversation with others and on my team, and in just being and exploring and listening to clients and what was needed. And frankly, as that fear subsided, that how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to feed myself fear? It's real. And so had to work to assuage that, and to trust and to be in that space of peace. And as I could be in that space of peace, could then see what those next possibilities were, and reclaim my voice again. The reclaiming a voice is a theme throughout my life. And so this has been a time, and that season was a time of sort of forgetting, and then rediscovering and reclaiming and finding how to bring it forward again.
Thank you for sharing. I'm imagining you being in this connectedness to peace
Mm-hmm.
and purpose and staying with, and then allowing for that singular focus to be for a while with the
Right.
one box.
Right.
And then at some point there's openness that happens, like you could say that's almost like a provision from the mind that says, oh, there's all this, and then allowing for it to come together.
Yes.
And staying with. And also, I really appreciate your honesty that fear of not being able to provide it was certainly there.
Absolutely.
It was just that you didn't let yourself be guided by it.
Right.
And
Right.
you made a different choice, and that made all the difference, as the beautiful poem said somewhere. So
Right.
as we're getting towards the end of this conversation, Renee, I'd like you to think about, what would you like to say to people or to a person that's finding themselves kind of in this in-between liminal space between fear and love. They may be consumed or pulled by this fear of not enough money, not enough approval, not enough job security, which is a big thing these days, and or fear of something else, losing a relationship, whatever it might be, and then this glimmering of the confidence of love that you've so clearly articulated in this conversation. What would you like to say to them, those people in liminal spaces?
Well, their experience is real. Like, I would want to acknowledge that that those experiences that are washing over people or moving through people are real, and not to be dismissed, and that to hold on, to lean in, to find and invite that love to come in, to find its way in, because it's there for each of us. And the choices that get us there are as varied and different as our life circumstances. So there's no like magic wand or formula about that, except the invitation to open to it, to ask it to come, and to be looking for it, and I think to understand and appreciate the power that it can have, and that sometimes it shows up in really unexpected ways. I think back to when my husband was in the plane crash, and we had bought a home, and it had an unfinished mother-in-law's apartment in the basement that some folks helped us to finish. And during that time, there were, a lot of people who, if you've suffered that kind of a trauma or that kind of crisis, what I've discovered is that the people that you think that will be there are not always the people who will be there for you. The sources of love that you would anticipate are not always the ones that are actually the sources of love. And that can be for a whole variety of reasons. But, if we're only looking for that from one channel, it might not be from that channel. And in this case, the source of love to help finish that apartment so that we could rent that and have a source of income, that was an unexpected source of love. And so those are there. And I think part of this is learning to invite and open to it.
Thank you so much, Renee. We've been speaking to Renée Smith. She's the founder and CEO of A Human Workplace. Helps people to create lives, workplaces, teams that are more human, more loving. Many things I took away from this conversation. One thing that just happened, that you just said, which was, and just open to it. Just open to it and let go of the attachment of what you think it should look like or where the provision should come from. You never know, but you're just open to it. You're just open to it, which is such a radically different orientation than the fearful contraction, which is tunnel focused on what we think should happen. So thank you so much. Any closing thing you want to say at the last few seconds that we have today?
Oftentimes people ask, is it really possible to get results and care for people? Right? If we think organizationally, and is it really possible to do that? And I just always want to remind people that it's the wrong question. And the question we should be asking ourselves is, how on earth are we going to get results if we don't care for each other?
How on earth are we going to get results if we don't care for each other? Thank you so much, Renee. This was heart-opening and so beautiful. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. We have these conversations every 2 weeks. You were with us today with Renée Smith. She's the CEO and founder of Human Workplace. In 2 weeks, we'll be here again with Robert Washington. He is a leader in Microsoft, also a martial arts master, and also a U.S. Navy veteran. And we're going to hear from him about how do we access strength in pretty extreme circumstances. And Renee also taught us about that today. Also, if you like to stay more involved in these conversations, you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere where you find podcasts like LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple, and of course there's replays on LinkedIn. You can find Renée Smith and Human Workplace on LinkedIn and on the World Wide Web and other places. And I look forward to seeing you again live if you choose to join us. And until then, please maybe sit with this practice of opening up to what love might look like today for you and for all of us. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.